Thanks for tuning in to the C-Suite Cyber Podcast, brought to you by Watchdog Cyber. Join us as we explore the critical intersection of business and cybersecurity, helping you protect your company, your customers, and your reputation. Whether you're a CEO, a CFO, or hold any other executive role in your company, the C-Suite Cyber Podcast is your go-to resource for staying ahead in today's digital age. Hey everyone, it's Aaron and Dan again with the C-Suite Cyber Podcast. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how susceptible small businesses actually are to cyber attacks. We often hear about big businesses in the news and scrolling through social media and LinkedIn and what have you, but the small businesses don't usually get the press. So we're going to talk about a couple case studies that we've come across recently. They're local to us, and we're going to give you some actionable items as a small business on things that you can do today, most of which are free to better prepare yourself to protect against an incident. So Dan, you want to talk about the first case study we've got?
Sure, absolutely. So, like you said earlier, small businesses, they're being targeted. And I think the owners and people that work there, they think that they're probably not going to get hit because they're probably too small. So these are great examples. The first one that we're going to talk about is a nonprofit organization with 3 people, and they support about 450 members for their organization. And again, just, going through the motions, not really understanding IT. They had an IT company, thought they were doing everything right. And an old email of somebody that worked there previously somehow got into the wrong hands, and they were able to gain access to their system. They were able to gain access to their website, so they shut down their website, basically just kind of shut down the whole operation. She said that they spent 3 to 4 weeks just trying to figure out what the heck happened. They didn't have no money to pay a ransom, so they're kind of stuck. They didn't know what to do. The IT company they were working with wasn't very helpful, so they ended up firing them. And got a different IT company. But they said it was probably about 4 to 6 weeks that they were just sort of in limbo and trying to maintain their customer base with the best way they could. But they had no cyber liability insurance. Their website got locked down. They had to get a new domain and start from scratch all over again. So,
Oh, wow.
It's those things that I think people think they just pay a ransomware. They pay the ransom and then all of a sudden they go back to work. They don't really realize all the things that come in after a breach happens. And you don't know it if you're not looking at it or not learning about it. We see it every day, right? We get notices, and our partners that we have, we get information from those guys. So we see this all the time. And we see the small businesses, like you mentioned earlier. Large businesses are in the news, right? The Caesars, the MGM, the CDK Global, CrowdStrike, which wasn't a breach, but
well, they did
it's
come out and say they had a small breach after all was said and done, but
right. So we'll see
see how that plays out. Yeah,
time
for
will
sure.
tell. Right, time will tell. But you think about that, you're like, oh my gosh, they took down, that's a big company. And that's why small business think, well, why would they come after me? I'm just a small person. And I always tell them, I say, listen, think about the clients that you have. Some small businesses have 1 or 2 clients that is their annual revenue, right? 80% of their revenue. Well, that's what they're trying to get to, right? Through you as a small business with no cybersecurity in place, you're an easy target to get to the bigger company they want to get to. So it's starting to think in terms of like a cyber criminal to actually understand how this all works.
Yeah, I mean, everybody is a part of everybody's supply chain, right?
Right.
And so you hit the nail on the head. If you are a small organization and your cyber posture, cyber hygiene isn't up to snuff, it absolutely gives them potential access to much bigger fish.
Right.
Um, yeah, the other thing to think about, with these large organizations, like they have huge teams and huge budgets, and most small businesses don't, right?
Yep.
And so if a large organization that has huge budgets and huge teams is getting hit and having significant damages after being hit, think about yourself as a small business.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have those budgets. You barely even have an IT budget, let alone a cybersecurity budget.
Right.
Um, and you certainly don't have, like I'm trying to think, United Health Group, right? They said they had a security team of something like 1,300 people. Um, Now, obviously, a small business doesn't need a team that size, but they need either a person internally that is considering it, or they need a partner that is going to handle those things for them.
Right.
And if you don't have either, you're ripe for the picking.
Right. Well, what's our one of our campaigns about this year? Sitting duck, right?
Yeah.
And just thinking about the client we just signed up, when he said, "I think I'm getting web feet," because he was a sitting duck.
Yeah.
But he understood and he got signed up to get taken care of. One guy. I mean, it just um, those people need help, and they have to really start to take it seriously because they can be they are a target and it can happen at any time.
So with this nonprofit, you said they didn't have cyber liability. They didn't have backups. So they
Nope.
were forced. They were
Right.
forced to either pay the ransom or figure out how to pay the ransom or start from scratch. And they chose
Yeah.
the latter, right?
Yeah. Right. And I mean, that's a long road. That's a long road to hoe.
Yeah, I'm thinking about one of our first customers, right? Um, he's he's a painter, right? That's his profession. It's a single guy. He does he basically GCs all of his jobs, right? So he'll hire some laborers to help paint an industrial complex or a residence or whatever. But again, single guy, single business owner, and man, he lived through what, almost 2 years
Yeah.
of hell.
Right.
And it started out as a business compromise, and then not only did they focus on him from a business aspect, but they shifted it to his personal life too,
Yeah.
and really like really messed with the guy. I mean, to the point where he was afraid to even leave his house, right?
Yeah. That's scary.
They're sending him text messages to both his work cell phone and his personal cell phone, with screenshots of what appear to be his machine and what appear to be, pictures from his social media, and just making very threatening statements to him, and, really got the guy on edge.
Yeah.
We were able to come in and help provide some solution to give him peace of mind that um you don't have to deal with this, right? We got
Hmm.
him we got him in the right contacts with local police departments, and they launched their own investigation, and he's in a much better spot today than he was when we first met him.
Right. Right.
It used to be that I'd get a phone call from him like every week, and
Right.
I haven't talked to him in almost 6 months.
Wow. Well, good. Good. Yeah, that was an interesting one. And I think that was a while ago, right? When we first kind of kicked everything off and got that call from him and just really realizing that any business is susceptible. It's just crazy.
Yeah, there's no discrimination. They don't care about who you are, what you do, how big you are, how small you are.
Right.
They just care, are you an easy target?
Yep.
And if you can do anything to make yourself less of a target, they'll move on. It's just
Yeah.
like, if you've got a barrage of break-ins in your neighborhood, right? The guys that are driving down the street, they're looking for the houses that, you know, they don't have lights on at night. they might have windows open, no fences,
Right.
like those are easy targets. Maybe
Right.
you leave your garage door open in the middle of the night,
Right.
right? Like those are all things that they're like, oh, well, that's an easy ripe for the picking, right?
Yep.
No, you want your house to have lights on, you want your doors shut, you want your windows shut, you want a fence, maybe a dog.
Yeah. A sign out there protected by ADT, like
Yeah,
something that's, those are all deterrents, right? And that's what has to happen. I mean, um, because they're going to look at it and it's like it's going to be too hard, and they're going to pass that up because there are so many other easy targets out there. I mean, if someone's listening to this, think about what questions would you want to ask your IT person, or you may not have IT person. Now you got to start asking yourself this: How am I protected? What am I doing? Am I really just thinking that I'm too small, no one's going to come after me? Well, that's not the case. So you got to have some things, and we'll talk about at the end of this some things that people can do. But it doesn't matter what size you are. I think you said it was the your size is not your shield,
yeah,
right? Like just because you're small doesn't mean you're protected. It doesn't work that way anymore.
yeah, yeah. And I just think there's a huge misconception of that, right?
Hmm.
We talk to a lot of people that just say, "Oh, I'm small. I don't,
Right.
that's overkill for what we are." I just had that conversation, the other day again with a current customer. We're doing some very basic services for them, and I've proposed more services in the past, which were respectfully declined, and I said that's fine.
Hmm.
That's your risk decision that you're making. I'll respect it.
Right.
Um, well, they got an unsolicited dark web report from a competitor. We'll call it a competitor. It's just another IT firm. Um, and he forwarded it to me. He says, "What is this?" And I said, "Well, it's a dark web report." And I said, "The information on it is factual. You guys have stuff exposed."
Hmm.
It's a conversation that I had with your business partner, and it was respectfully declined. And I said, if you're open to it, we can do an actual assessment and kind of educate you on where your risk is today and how you want to handle it.
Right.
And he was like, "Well, I didn't know about this conversation, and yeah, I absolutely want to learn more about it." Right. So I think, a lot of people they just need to educate themselves. And then
Hmm.
if you know what your exposure is, then you can make that decision, right? Do you just want to continue rolling the dice or keeping your fingers crossed or whatever the term
Yeah.
is, or do you
Right.
want to address it? I mean, it's your decision at the end of the day. We just we talk to so many folks that are of the mindset that I'm just too small,
Hmm.
and it's just not the case, right?
Right.
You are just as susceptible as anybody else out there.
Right. Yeah, if not more, really, right? Like we just said just a few minutes ago, you have no tools in place, you don't have the things in place to stop somebody, you're just an easy target.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the final one that we're going to talk about here is again, they're another current customer. They came to us. I think, if I remember correctly, you met the guy at
Hmm.
a networking event, right?
Yep, yep, yeah. That was back in December, and we just started talking, and he kind of told me what went on, and again, just another way for people to start to think about, hiring employees. People love to put on LinkedIn, you see the balloons and stuff. Hey, I just started a brand new position. Wish me luck, whatever the case is. And that's a perfect target for a cyber criminal to come in and exploit that person, acting as their boss or somebody in the business. I mean, the new person wants to do well, they want to, make an impression. So they're eager to kind of look at something and do what they're asked to do. And this person went out and bought $2,000 in they were not Best Buy cards, but whatever, like gift cards. And she talked to the owner the next day and said, "Did you get the stuff?" And he's like, "What stuff?" And I got the numbers and I emailed them to you. You didn't get those, and it wasn't him. So there's a lot of different ways that they're finding their way in there. And after we spoke, somebody that's got a scare or a breach typically is ready to make a change. And They just want to kind of understand what to do, and then they do it. It's the people that have not had a breach, or that don't know of anyone that's gone through a breach, that tend to sit on the sidelines and keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And they're probably going to get breached before they put something in place, and that's a bad thing. So, um, I think we've done a great job with him. I mean, they love us, and now he's, you know, turned out to be a great customer. He's growing, so he understands what needs to be done. He's taken all of all of your advice on what needs to be done, and he's following through with it and putting it in. And it's just interesting because they didn't have anything before, right? They didn't have MFA before. They didn't have password policies before. Now they do. And at first it was kind of like, is everybody going to be okay with this? It's not hard. It really isn't hard. And once people start to do it and understand that it's not that hard and realize the protection that it does put in place, I think it's going to be a no-brainer at some point. People are just going to have to do it. And once they get on board, you know what they're going to say. Oh, gosh, why did I wait so long to do this? So we'll
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Dan, what are some actionable things that small businesses can do today that are either no cost or low cost uh, to better, you know, better get their hygiene in order?
Yeah. Well, I think first I would say passwords, right? Passwords need to be strong, 13 characters or more, right? Upper and lowercase letters, numbers and symbols. So that's a very first piece, I would say. Stop using your pets' names, your kids' names, the street that you live on with the street number, things that are out there on social media that people can find because they plug that stuff into password generators and they'll pick it apart. So I would say the first thing would be just getting strong passwords in place. And if you're worried about not remembering those things, there's password managers, and they're very inexpensive to use, to get, and easy to use.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of them are free, some of them are very low cost.
Hmm.
Some of them have family plans.
Right.
Um, I mean, I'm a huge fan of password managers. I haven't had to create a real password in a long time, right?
Yeah.
I just have the password manager create all my passwords. I think my current vault it's approaching 400 or so.
Wow.
And I don't know any of them except for the password that gets me into my vault.
Yeah. Well, that's all you need to know, right? And I think that's part of it, right? People just need to know that, like, how does it work? But a business owner's running their business. They're not looking into password managers. They're not looking into how it works, what it's going to do. And these tools are out there. So, definitely that's an easy one.
Talking about passwords real quick too, I think it's also imperative just to bring up the fact that most modern browsers nowadays, your Firefox, Chrome, Edge, all of them, they all give you the ability to save your passwords in the browser. We highly recommend not doing that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Don't do it.
Because if they are saved in your browser, the way the technology works is it loads up the password database into your system memory upon boot. And if you get some type of info stealer malware on your machine, your passwords are going to be the first thing stolen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a great point, right? People think oh, I'm protected. I'm putting it here. You're not. So that's another great point. I think the other thing too, updating your system. And we talked about this a little bit. That's something that's easy to do. Easy to do if you know, right? Turning on automatic updates. And I think you can talk a little bit more about that since you know where to go and do that. So if you want to take that one.
Yeah, it's easy for the Windows stuff, right? You go into your settings application on your Windows machine, and if you do a quick search for Windows Update, there'll be a few toggles to just flip and make sure that everything is set to automatic. Um, Definitely would recommend that. Your third party applications are going to be a little more tougher, like your Adobe Reader or Adobe's really like the primary one
Yeah.
that comes to mind right now. It does a pretty good job at being a pest, right? Adobe Reader is a product that I feel like hasn't changed in the last 5 years, but it wants to update almost daily. Um,
Right.
so, but yeah, anywhere that you can make sure auto updates are enabled, that would definitely be a recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's third party stuff. I know there's a lot of MSPs out there that will do updates for Microsoft products, but they don't do third party stuff, and every software that's out there um, can be exploited at some point, and they're going to create a patch and it needs to go out. So being able to look at third party patching is a good point. Um, I think security awareness training. I've talked to people, and I think sometimes they think annual training is good enough. I just don't see that as good enough. I know we do ours by every 2 weeks, and over the course of the year, that's a decent amount of training. And I'm not gonna. I'm biased. The platform we use, I think it's really good. But that being said, just getting something in front of people to help them understand this and kind of build on their knowledge over time, and so they understand what to look for. AI has changed a lot of things. We used to go a couple years ago where you say, "Hey, listen, it's easy to see grammatical errors or misspellings. Things just don't look right." Well, that's kind of all gone by the wayside now with AI. I mean, these are all generated through AI, and these phishing emails, I mean, they look legit.
Yeah, and they're only going to get better,
Right.
because you've got generative AI for the text piece, and then you've got generative AI even now for images, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I just saw yesterday actually, the infamous PayPal invoice scam has resurfaced, and
Mm,
the template that is being used is just it's really good, right?
really. Wow.
So for somebody that is not educated on those types of scams, I mean, they're gonna fall for it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
security awareness training is hyper critical nowadays, and like you said, doing it annually is really a disservice to you as an organization.
Hmm.
Your people are your front line.
Right.
Um, so if you can get your people trained on the threats that are literally changing every day,
Hmm.
uh, you give yourself the best shot at stopping some type of incident. 91% of incidents are born through a malicious email, right?
Yeah.
Um, so again, training your staff, it's so critical.
Right.
Building that human firewall, right? That's
Yeah.
what we talk about.
Yeah.
A free resource for that, actually, the government, with cybersecurity, um, infrastructure security administration, CISA.
Yep.
I'm sorry, cybersecurity. Yeah, critical. Ugh, I was right. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency,
Yeah.
CISA. They offer up free cybersecurity security awareness training resources.
Hmm.
So we'll put a link in the description of the video below that will link off to that website. But yeah, I mean, bunch of free resources available to you as a business owner that you
Yeah.
may be able to start implementing some things to start training some staff. I know in the past when I've looked at it, they've had like posters that you can get printed for the office. Um, that you can get blown up and put on your walls. Put it up in the break room. Um, Again, the whole purpose is to just bring awareness to your
Right.
staff of things to look at.
Yeah, exactly. And again, business owners that want to start down this path. I mean, again, free resources, dive in, see what you can filter out of that and use it and put those things in place. Um, I think there's a couple more. One of them is MFA, multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication. I, it's not hard to use. Again, it's one of those things where you're like, oh my gosh, now I got to put a code in, I got to do that. Well, just go back to earlier in their conversation, we talked about that organization, the nonprofit, that spent 4 to 6 weeks trying to rebuild their business and put things in place. If they would have been using MFA, would it have helped? Well, if you're logging in somewhere and you got to get a code, that old email would have never been able to log in. Would it have prevented it? I'm going to say yes. It would have at least let somebody move on, right? They're
Yeah.
not getting in, they'll move on to something else. So to say, well, I got to do this for that couple seconds every time, I mean, until you go through a breach, you're not going to realize how valuable that tool is. So multi-factor authentication, I think, is something that should be added in.
Yeah, I think it's important, to think about, right? Like the uh, the amount of data breaches that are happening daily at this point,
Mm-hmm.
right? The likelihood of you having an employee's information out there on the dark web, a set of credentials is pretty high nowadays.
Yeah.
Um, we one of our vendors, one of their taglines is, hackers don't hack anymore; they just log in,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And it's so true. So having multi-factor authentication in place, it is hypercritical. It's
Mm-hmm.
by adding that additional layer to somebody's login. Yeah, like you said, Dan, it's a pain in the butt, especially if you're not doing it today. But it only takes, I would say, less than 5 days to get used to it. You know,
Right. Yeah. Like anything
um,
else.
and the value behind it is so high.
Yes. I agree. I agree.
This also, triggers another thing to add onto this is you as a business owner also you've got to decide whether or not you want your employees to be able to use their work email
Mm.
as a means of signing up for XYZ platform. And
Right.
I guess what I mean by that is, like, do you have a policy in place that says you are to use your work email only for work purposes, right? Or do you just, do you allow the Wild West, right? Are they allowed
Right.
to use their work email for their Facebook account and Pinterest and,
Right.
whatever?
Right.
Um, because again, that's how these breaches happen, right? If you've got people that are using their corporate accounts to sign up for these third party applications and that third party application gets breached, now me as an attacker, I'm like, all right, well, I know this is a corporate email. It's not, it's not Gmail, it's not Yahoo, it's not Hotmail, it's not whatever. It's a corporate email. I've
Mm-hmm.
got a username password combo. What can I get into now? Right. So they start going to the bank accounts, Chase, Bank of America's, and they just start plugging those credentials in and
Yeah.
hope that it works.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
again, I would think, build a policy around that, get your people to understand the purpose of that policy and have
Mm-hmm.
them sign off on it.
Yeah. Well, and that ties back into the first thing we said, passwords, right? That those credentials get out there, and if the credentials are out there and you don't have any kind of password policy in place where you're using 13 characters and it's got to be strong password. They're using their generic password that they use for all their accounts, right? It just makes it so much easier. So it's these little tiny pieces that, if you can get these aligned, you can start to protect a business by putting things right, putting things in place that are more accurate.
Yeah.
Um, the last thing I think, and this will tie back to the first company that we talked about, is backups, right? Are you backing up your information? Is it being verified? And I think the first thing I want to mention is we hear it all the time. Well, my information is in the cloud. I've my stuff is that I have a third party or company that I put that handles all my stuff. Great. Who backs it up? Whose responsibility is it? Right? You look back at CDK Global. They just got hit and they handled what 15,000 um, dealerships across the nation. Okay, well that changed how they did business. Think about if they had all their information in their database and all that got breached, but all that went away. Think of it just went away. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, we told you to back it up. It's in the terms and conditions. Microsoft has it in theirs. We're like, well, I got it in, it's in Microsoft. That's great, but who's backing it up? Who's
Yeah.
checking it?
Yeah, I mean the thing with a lot of those, these cloud applications is they're shared responsibility platforms, right?
Mm-hmm.
The vendor themselves, they are ensuring that you have a platform to store data and modify data and access data and what have you, but you are the data owner.
Right.
You
Yep.
are responsible for your data. And yeah, like you said, Microsoft, Google, they've got it right in their terms and conditions. I don't know what section off the top of my head,
Yeah.
but if you read through it, it absolutely spells that out that you are the data owner and you're responsible for your data and backing it up. And
Mm-hmm.
I would hazard to guess that most SaaS platforms, software as a service platforms, are very much of that school of thought as well.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's important that your data. I mean, think about your business.
I
You're
mean,
a
think
small
about
business. Yeah.
like I think about our QuickBooks Online, right?
Yeah.
QuickBooks, they don't back up our data.
Right.
That's a responsibility of us to do, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And that
Yeah.
doesn't matter if you're QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop, right? Make a backup of your data.
Right. Yep.
And you hit it on the head early in this piece of the conversation is having a backup isn't enough, right? You've got to verify it and
Mm-hmm.
test and make sure that it actually works. And you don't
Right.
want to be testing it when when
After the
shit goes
breach.
sideways, right?
Right. After the breach. Do we have what's going on? What happens? That's a whole nother conversation, right? Talk about an incident response plan,
Yeah.
but still, these are the easiest things. We said we'll post that link out there to CISA. There's a lot of resources out there. People can just start looking for things, right? I mean, all you gotta do is Google it and see what comes up and start to do a little bit of research. It's a lot of information, a lot of stuff to wade through, but it's out there. I think we talked about updates and patching. We talked about passwords, security awareness training, um, backups, and multi-factor authentication. Those five items are what we typically also see in a application for a cyber liability insurance policy, right? So too often we see a rider on a policy that doesn't really give much coverage. It's not going to help. Second thing we see is the application, someone attested to having MFA or backups or security awareness training, any of those. Um, and if you said yes to that and you don't have it in place, I'm sure everybody that's going to watch this is going to know that policy will not pay out. So you're just wasting your money on that. You have to understand how this all ties in. All these pieces fit in. It's like a puzzle. It all comes together, and that's your protection for your business. You got to have an insurance policy. We talked about some of the things that happen after a breach. It's more money, more lawsuits, class action lawsuits, all this stuff, the recovery, the remediation, everything that comes after the fact. No insurance policy that pays out, then that means that money to do that comes out of your pocket.
Yeah. Yeah, it has a huge effect on the bottom line, you know.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Um I think one of the important things with cyber insurance is not only does it help you with all those things, but, a lot of comprehensive plans will also help against, the reputational damage that you're going to suffer, right?
Right. Right.
Because once people start finding out that you've gone through a breach, studies show that like 85% of your customers, they're going to go elsewhere. They're going to find somebody else that is
Mm-hmm.
going to better protect them.
Right.
And so, again, having cyber insurance and having a comprehensive plan, not just a rider, will help protect you against some of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, think about this. This thought just came in. Talking to a company right now, and it's a service company, right? So a service company could be a plumber, electrician. Now, if you're talking about a small business, maybe he's got two or three people working for him. Could be one person. But if you've got if you've handled 1,000 clients over the past 6, 7, 8, 10 years, and you have their information, and you get breached, right? Let's say you have 1,000 customers. Well, and you have to offer them identity theft protection because you were breached. Well, 1,000 times 100 is $100,000. Where's that coming from?
Right.
Right. And I think that's what people don't, you start putting numbers to this, people start to understand, like, well, crap, I never thought about it. I have to do that. Absolutely, you have to do that. Right. It's going to keep adding up and adding up. And if you don't have a cyber liability insurance policy that's going to help pay for all that stuff, it's coming out of your pocket.
Yeah.
So you're either going bankrupt or out of business or something. And you don't have to. That's the thing. You don't have to. Don't
Yeah.
wait until after. Don't wait
Right.
till after.
Yeah, I think it's so much easier to make an investment in being proactive than
Yeah.
all the expenses that come after a breach.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, we can't tout how how emphatic we are about
Mm-hmm.
being proactive. Um, and I think, I think another thing as far as proactive is, this is important to bring up too, is, what we discuss with a lot of our customers is very much a proactive solution.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also not naive enough to believe that what I'm putting in place today isn't being reverse engineered somewhere out there, right?
Right.
So I think as you as a business owner, as you're talking with folks, um, and they tell you, "Oh yeah, we've got you secure 100%. You're never going to have a breach." It's a lie, right?
Yeah.
The purpose of proactively protecting your environment is to limit the damages when it happens, right? Everybody's susceptible. And either you're going to be in a good spot where you're able to limit the damage after it hits your organization, or you're not going to have things in place and it's going to be a very, very bad day and probably a bad couple weeks for you.
Yeah. Exactly. Probably more than a couple weeks. Right. I mean, sleepless nights. I can't even imagine. I have never gone through one. I know you dealt with one at school, but it's brutal. We talk to people have gone through it, and it's just brutal.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts, Dan?
Um, I would just, we say it all the time, but I would just say get started, talk to somebody, check your environment. Do you have any vulnerabilities? Get a plan of action in place so that you could start to put some tools in there that will help protect you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I'll even offer up, if you've got any type of worry for your organization, we'll even, if you want to reach out to us, we offer up a free risk assessment.
Mm-hmm.
We can come in, assess your environment, and help educate you on where you stand today, and help you develop a plan for tomorrow and
Yep.
making sure that your business is protected.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate you tuning in. This is Aaron and Dan with Watchdog Cyber, and this was the C Suite Cyber Podcast. We'll catch you next time.
See y'all.